Welcome to the LB's The Lover of Books author chat. Now to introduce this wonderful novelist. Okay, I could read, a lot of cool stuff from Publishers Weekly. I could read the book list rave reviews, but instead, I want everybody to hear what Emily Henry wrote on Instagram. I absolutely love this blurb. So here we go. The change is like a guttural scream and somehow also soft, tearful hug of a book, and I couldn't have loved it anymore. It was marketed as Witches of Eastwick meets Big Little Lies, two stories I really love, and I both think that's a fairly accurate pitch and that it somehow undersells what it is. So who is this person that wrote this book? All right, I'm going to read straight from her sleeve. Kirsten Miller is a groundbreaking feminist author in YA literature, best known for her popular Kiki Strike series. In addition to writing novels, Kirsten spent 25 years as a strategist in the advertising industry. I wonder where that came from. And during that time, she worked for some of the largest agencies in the world, as well as boutique agencies and an 8-person startup. Let's welcome Kirsten Miller. Yay, so glad you're here.
I also paid Emily for that quote. Big butt.
When I saw that pop up, I was just like, what a
that
way
was
to
the
be,
sweetest
right?
thing. Like, honestly, she's such an amazing person, because I don't know if you guys know the hell that authors have to go through to get blurbs. I mean, it's basically like before a book comes out, you spend months just, begging people to read it, because it's, you're asking somebody to take days out of their life to read your book. So the fact that she did that unprompted was just, it was the nicest gift you could possibly give another author. So I'm eternally grateful for that.
So, how does that process work? Because we'd love to hear the behind the scenes. Do you take and just send a book to authors that you think might want to read it and hope that they'll get back to you? How does that work?
So it's kind of a crapshoot, and for me particular, because this is my first adult book. I came out of the YA world, and I have lots of contacts in the YA book world. And unfortunately, they wanted to get adult authors, since this was my debut adult book, and I didn't really know anyone personally. So there were a couple of authors that I really liked that I sent the book to. There were some people that my editor knew that she thought might like the book that she sent the book to. Same with my agent. And then it really just comes down to who's got the time,
Right.
because this is like a 500-page book, like asking somebody to read it. That's a huge thing to ask. So sometimes people are really, really, really nice, and they have the time. And hopefully they have something nice to say about it. But I totally understand when people say, listen, I'm just completely booked up right now, because it happens to all of us.
Yeah, it depends on where they are in their cycle of writing or what their life looks like at the moment. You just don't know.
No, if somebody asked me right now, I would have to say no, even if it was my best friend in the world, because I'm trying to finish something for a deadline in December. And I don't have the time right now.
It's crunch time. Well, let's hear your blurb on this book. Like, if someone had not read this book, I love hearing what authors have to say. Describe it.
Well, I think it's about 3 women who have reached, I hate the phrase a certain age. I hate it so much. Like, I want to like choke it to death, but they've reached my age, which I'm 49. And they've been told all the stories about what it's supposed to mean to like get to this point in your life. And they look around and they realize that none of it's true. And they also realize that there are certain things that come with reaching, your late 40s, early 50s, and that in this case, they're with them. They discover that they have acquired certain powers, and they're not over the top Marvel kind of powers, but they are, I think, very, very based. Even they're a little supernatural. They're very based in reality. And the 3 of them come together. They find the body of a young girl who's been discarded on the side of the road, and they don't accept the official story for how she died, and they go out and look for her killer. And then they take on all the bad guys, all of them, every one of them.
Well, I loved their connection to each other. You know, their bond, their sense of purpose, their sense of place, like they just meshed, and they're all three so different.
Yeah.
So what was important to you when setting up these characters? Because there really aren't too many crossover traits besides loyalty and their love for one another. So what was it that you wanted to create in each of them?
Well, I wanted to show, because I really think it's important, and I think we all know this. It's something that we all know, but it's not something we always practice. But I think that one of the things that I wanted to show is just how powerful we can be if we all come together. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to show women from different walks of life, from different backgrounds, coming together and sort of having this incredibly powerful friendship, and going on this mission together. Because I think that, this is something that we need to do. We need to all join hands and kick some butt. And I really wanted these ladies to kind of represent that. And more than anything, I just wanted them to feel like real people. I did not want them to feel like, Marvel superheroes. I wanted them to feel very much like people that you would know in your everyday life, like people like you. And me and everybody else on this Zoom. And that was the most important thing to me of all was, yes, they have powers, but they need to be people that we can see ourselves in.
Now we see Harriet first. She's our first character to arrive on the scene. I mentioned earlier when I read your bio that you came from an advertising background. Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to use your own background to put into Harriet?
Well, I mean, this book was me working through a lot of stuff that I'd been through in my life. I didn't want to run the risk of having people accuse me of making stuff up. So I borrowed very liberally from my own life and from the lives of women that I knew, people that I loved, people who had told me their stories at one point or another, because I wanted it to be as close to reality as possible. So Harriet's career is very much like my own. And there are incidents in that chapter that actually happened to me. So that was my way of exercising some demons that I picked up while I was working in the advertising industry, as one does. And that was, it was hilarious because I've had a lot of people that I've worked with in advertising contact me about the book. And even the guys are like, yep, that's what it's like.
Nail on the head, huh?
That's what it's like. And I have heard some stories since this was published. Like there have been a couple of stories that have blown my mind about hijinks in the advertising industry.
Well, when did do you still, is that over, that part of your life, the advertising part? Like when did the writing, how did that sort of shape out?
Well, I started writing. So I wrote my first book when I was, I don't know, I think it came out when I was 31. And I continued writing and working on the side because writing is very difficult to make, a living at. So for a long time I did both. And I actually really enjoyed it because they used two different parts of my brain. So when I got really, really tired of one, I would switch off and go to the other. And it worked really, really well. But at a certain point, it got incredibly exhausting, and I knew I had to choose one or the other. And also, as I said in the book, there is a certain point at which women are no longer welcome in the advertising industry. And that is right about the age of 45. Okay. And suddenly you start going in for interviews. And I heard this at least 3 or 4 times. You'd have a go in for an interview and have a really great discussion with somebody. And then they'd come back to you and they'd like, oh, we really love talking to you, but we think you're too senior for the role. And
another great phrase.
Yeah, it would be a really senior role. We would be talking like very, very high level positions. And it's like, wait, how could I be too senior for this? And I was like, oh, you mean too old. I get it. And so I heard that over and over again. And then I realized, oh, okay, so I've aged out of the industry. And by that point, I was fine with it. I had it. I wasn't willing to put up with it anymore. So now I'm exclusively writing. And doing other things in the writing area, but no advertising, thank God.
So it hasn't improved. Like it still
No.
is as bad as it ever was.
No, and in fact, one of the first people who contacted me, one of the great things about, and it's like one of the silver linings of the COVID era is that I have been able to do a lot of these chats with, with book clubs and stuff. And sometimes somebody will reach out to me and I'll talk to them just because there's like, for example, there was a young woman who was just starting a podcast, and she was, she asked me if I would talk to her. And one of the reasons that I was more than happy to do it was because she was in advertising and I wanted to pick her brain about what it was. I was like, is it still the same? And she was like, yeah, it's exactly how you described it in the book. Like to this day, like it is exactly like that. And I felt terrible. I would have hoped like in the few years that I've been, sort of doing my own thing, that things might have improved, but apparently, according to her, they haven't.
That's disappointing, right? You kind of hope at some point that 50% of the population is going to be recognized as
well,
equal.
It's more than that. I mean, the real irony is that women over 40 buy everything.
Yeah.
Like we literally buy everything.
Yeah.
And we are the number one consumer of almost everything that you can possibly imagine. And yet we are not the ones making the ads for ourselves. Apparently we're not qualified to do that. So that's
I think really what opened my eyes was when you described what is attractive.
Yeah.
Right? Because, advertising has been what's sold to the world, what is beautiful, what is attractive. And I loved when Nessa had that aha moment of, I've got it inside me and I can't buy it. I just have it, And so that was a really cool moment for me. And I think probably for a lot of the women on this call, because it's, it's something that's been so drummed down into us for so long, because that's all we see: TV, ads, everything.
Yeah. But it's, they're trying to give you beauty that you can buy or that you have to buy, but it's true. Like, you sit in a room with somebody who's got that spark inside of them, like that person, you call it what you want, but like, that's attractive. Those sorts of people are the ones you want to be with. Those are the ones that you want to spend time with, and it's not just women, it's men as well. I mean, that's Absolutely. Like, and that to me is true beauty, and that's lifelong. Like if you can maintain that spark, and a lot of people don't. I mean, let's be honest about that. A lot of people let that spark go out. But like if you have that inside of you, I think that's what makes you, that's what makes other people want to be with you.
Right. And the people that bring it out of you too. Like you want to find those people. And I think they did with those three, which was a really cool trifecta.
Yeah.
So this book is set in a fictional town, I'm assuming. I could not find it on a map. How do you pronounce it? Mattauk?
Mattauk, yeah. So often confused with Montauk. But
Montauk. Well, when I looked up Montauk on the map, and it almost looked like it could be the point, almost physically that edge of that island, that it could be. Is there some comparison there?
Well, it's Mattauk is kind of a joke because it sounds like Montauk, and it's right. I found it when I was doing research about Long Island and the colonial history of Long Island, because that's what I do for fun. And they said that there was a tribe of indigenous people there that had described this one area as, they called it Mattauk because it meant the bad place in their language. Okay. And I thought, because all of these names out there were borrowed from the indigenous languages, I thought, this would be exactly the sort of name that, that ignorant people would keep because they thought it sounded, very authentic, and meanwhile it meant bad place. So it was just a little joke, but it sounds like Montauk, but it's not real. No, I made it up.
Well, and a little bit of foreshadowing there too, right? I mean, a bad place for what's going to come. Now, when you are talking about Nessa, I thought an important part of her story was not only that she was a mother and a healer, but becoming a widow because that also separated her from the other two women. And after losing her husband, how she basically thought her life was over. I mean, her kids are out of the house, but then this depression sets in, and you go on to talk about suicide.
Yeah.
Why did you go there, and why was that important for her and for this story, for it to get to that point? Because it was a serious, moment.
Yeah. Well, I think that I think that this is somebody who had, and I think it's something that a lot of us feel, whether it's through the death of a spouse, or whether it's through divorce, or whether it's just through sort of this, I think, there's a point in all of our lives where people kind of fall away and we feel like we've been left on our own. And, here's this woman who's led this incredibly vibrant life and who suddenly finds herself all alone, and she doesn't quite know what to do with herself. Her life that's been so loud and so, everything going on has gotten very, very, very quiet. And I wanted to really sort of focus on that for a minute. And so, because I do think I think that is a situation that a lot of women at my age find themselves in, is just sort of this moment where you're by yourself and you have to make that decision. Do I go forward or do I not? And one of the ways that she's able to go forward is by sort of looking for that strength. She speaks to her grandmother, and her grandmother, who's dead, obviously, tells her to get it together, and she has more to do. But I think that just that sense of looking deep into your history, into yourself, into, looking for the gifts that you still have inside of you, and finding a purpose and a passion and a reason for sort of going on and continuing, not just for the next day and for the next week, but for the next 20 years as well. And so that was really the point of that was having her go on that trip, sort of where she gets to the very, very bottom, and yet she finds that, she finds that reason to sort of keep going, and it's inside of her. She, it's just, so it's, I think that, yeah, I think we all get to that point at one point or another, or a lot
I
of
love, oh, absolutely. And I'm getting there because mine are getting later in high school, and, I can just see it coming, right? But I love that she carried her grandmother with her. That legacy was part of her, and she woke up and realized it. And then not only that, but she found Joe, and that spark that Joe had in her to kind of bring her out of it, almost like the yin to the yang sort of relationship.
Yeah.
But before we get to Joe, I want to go back to Ness, because Ness has a lot of historical background to her.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about that South Carolina part of the book and how that came to be. So where was the seed in this? Did that come first, or did the women, how did your mind work with this?
Well, we were talking before this started, I'm from North Carolina. And Southerners, one of the things about us is we always, at least in my experience, we always have these stories about our families, right? Like there's always this mythology about your family, right?
Yeah.
There's somebody could do this and somebody could do that. And in my family, it was always said that the women in our family could see ghosts. So Nessa was one of my favorite characters from the beginning. So I wanted to give her that from my family history. And so that's, we don't go out and find women who've been murdered or anything like that. But I love this idea of this sort of supernatural tradition that's passed down from one generation of women to the next. And this idea that there's continuity, that we're all part of this movement that's trying to address these wrongs that have gone unaddressed for so long.
So did the gifts for the other two come from anywhere, or was that just your imagination?
Well, sort of. So they all, this book was, I can't even tell you how long I'd been working on this in my head. I always think of it as the process of writing as kind of like a bird building, a nest, and you go out and you find the little sparkly piece of tinsel there, and you find the little, piece of thread over there, and the vine here, and it takes a long time to get all the materials together, and then you start weaving. So, I mean, the inspiration came from a million different places, but I do for Joe. I remember years ago, I used to go to this gym,
Mhm.
and I was writing full time at the moment. So I would go in like, early in the afternoon, and right as I was leaving around lunchtime, this woman would come in every day. And she was like a very fancy, she was some sort of fashion woman. She was always perfectly dressed with like this beautiful red hair. And she would come in looking amazing, and she would get on this elliptical. And for about an hour, she would beat that thing up. Like I've never seen anybody. And it wasn't like she was, doing it to keep super fit. She was like punching the air and like cursing and all of this other sort of stuff. And I kept thinking, like, she's really mad at something. Like she's here to burn off rage. And, I kept having these like kind of fantasies, like, what if she was the one powering the gym? like,
Yeah.
what if it was her on that elliptical that was providing all the electricity for Greenwich Village? And so that was kind of where the inspiration came from. It's like, what if we could take all of that energy and actually channel it into
Mhm.
something that we wanted to do? So that was the inspiration for her. And
And you don't even know that person, right? She's just like,
no, and honestly, that was 13 years ago. So like that was before my daughter was born. So, that's how long some of these things get stuck in your head, and you're like, okay, that I'm going to work with someday, but I don't know quite what to do with it yet. And then it just comes out.
okay, all you redheads out there, you never know if you're on elliptical, it could be you. You may
Yeah.
be Joe out there. I love it. So okay, so you have an idea of Joe, you've got an idea of Ness from your family. Where did Harriet come from besides the advertising part?
So Harriet was always, I am a very sort of witchy nature person myself, but she's not based on me. She's like who I would love to be when I grow up. I'm more like Joe in real life, but she was kind of a combination of a lot of different people. She's a little bit like my grandmother. My grandmother was very tall, a very pretty woman who was very like, she had an aura of power about her that was kind of interesting. And she was a little bit of Lauren Hutton with that big feral smile.
Yes,
And a
that's how I
little,
pictured.
yeah, and I named her after a woman that I knew years ago who also had a smile like that, who just, was just one of these smiles that made you think she might want to eat you. And I always loved her. I always thought she was the greatest, coolest lady ever. So her name was Harriet Sharp, and I gave her her name to the character. But it was just, yeah, that character too had been a long time coming. I just love this idea of somebody who, almost like a little poison ivy from, the Batman comics, somebody who can just kind of is so in touch with the natural world that she can kind of convince it to do what she wants it to do.
Yeah, I mean, she's fascinating. And then you almost wonder if she has a little bit of sight in
Yes.
her as well,
Yeah.
because she knows things the other two don't know, or maybe aren't willing to know yet.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's her real superpower. So she works with nature and all of that, but her real superpower is that she has had the blinders taken off, right? She sees the world as it really is now. She's not seeing it the way other people want her to see it. She's not seeing it in terms of, these sort of other people's ideas of right and wrong or good or bad. She sees things as they actually are.
Yeah, there's no filter with Harriet.
There's
Like
no
she doesn't see.
filter. Yeah. So that's one of the, that comes like her not giving a damn about anything is one of the reasons she's able to do a lot of what she's able to do. But it's also one of the reasons that she's able to see things that the others aren't. She's able to see that the system just is not going to ever work in this situation for these victims. And so, that's when we talk about powers that one can actually literally achieve at a certain age in life, that is one of them, having taken the blinders off.
Do you think she's able to take the blinders off sooner because she doesn't have children? Because you mentioned in the book, children are kryptonite.
Yes, they are.
You know,
Yes.
and she doesn't have she never did have a child. So do you think that willingness to let go and to just all inhibitions and just live, like, do you think that there's any correlation there?
That's so interesting because I'd never considered that. When I say children are like kryptonite, I mean that in the best sense.
Absolutely. I know
They're lovely, adorable kryptonite, but they are
right.
sort of, they're your weakness. It's like I always said, there's a reason that kryptonite exists in comic books, and that's because if it didn't, Superman would be too powerful. And that's also the reason Lois Lane exists, right?
Right.
If she didn't exist, he would have nothing to care about. There would be nothing for the bad guys to hold over his head. And she's kind of, it's an interesting thing. She's kind of like the mercenary, right? The person who's able to go into battle and not have to worry about, kids or a significant other or anything else. She can go in and just do exactly as she pleases. It's an interesting thought. That had not occurred to me personally, but possibly, yeah.
Now, Liz says that she loves how the book was diverse, but the language that you used was so different. It was so normalizing and not just pointing you straight into it versus defining some characteristics like race, very matter-of-factly. Was that intentional?
Absolutely. I live in Brooklyn. Like that's what my world looks like. Like, I don't need to point it out,
Yeah.
like this is, I just, my world is one in which different kinds of people come together, and you don't necessarily talk about how you're all different. You just come together and fight bad guys. That's what we do. Well, every day.
I liked it better because it felt more like life, not so much a lesson, if that makes sense.
Well, I cannot remember her name, and this is horrible because I should, and I'm just really bad with names in general. It's a real problem. But so I went to see an author, a young adult author. I think she actually might be a middle grade author, speak a long time ago, and she was a Black woman, and she said, what I'd like to see? I'd like to see more books about like kids just doing stuff. Like they don't need to be fighting for justice. They just need to be kids doing kid stuff. And I thought, what, that's a really, because that's my world. Like I don't sit around, it's so yes, I did that very purposely because, hopefully, that's where we'll all get to at some point.
That's our goal. Now since we have these women fighting, we need to talk about who they're fighting against. So we have some pretty good villains in there. Do you have any real life inspirations? Because I was picking up on some of it, but I was just wondering if that was intentional. Okay.
No, all of them. So like I said, I wanted to stay as close to real life as possible. I didn't want to be accused of making stuff up because I did want to go really, really out there, and I wanted to push the limits as much as I could. And I thought I'd be able to get away with it if I stuck with villains who I borrowed from real life. So they're all borrowed from real life. Okay. You obviously have, a little Jeffrey Epstein in there.
Yep.
Who's, if I get to meet one person and punch them in the face at some point, I would love it to be him, or Ghislaine Maxwell. So there's that. The rich man in the hotel that Joe meets is based on a guy named Dominic Strauss-Kahn, who basically assaulted a cleaning person in a hotel here in New York a while back. He was the head of the International Monetary Fund, and he basically got away with it. The sort of deaths themselves are based largely on the Long Island serial killer. And the sheriff, I won't give it away, but like the sheriff in that case plays an interesting role as well. If you guys are interested in true crime, there's a podcast called Unraveled that's really fascinating. That goes into the first season of it, goes into the Long Island serial killer. and this sort of very, very wealthy community that may have helped cover up some very, very evil deeds of the local sheriff and some of the wealthier male members of the community. So yeah, I borrowed liberally from all of it because these guys are real. And these are the sorts of people that we're dealing with. People who think that they can get away with whatever they want to, people who feel like young women are commodities for them to buy and use as they see fit. And I think that one of the things that we can do, or things that I hope to do, my personal goals is, having reached an age where I finally feel like I know what I'm doing. And I feel like I've got the experience and the wisdom to actually try to make a difference in the world. I would like to make the world a safer place for younger women. And these are the guys that we need to go after.
Now, you talked about doing some research with the podcast and with, different, like the Long Island, just what does it look like, research for this particular book? Was it different from before, or was it something that you can talk to us about how that process was for you?
I like I said, I mean, there are books that I've done a significant amount of research immediately before sitting down to write, but this one was really more about me taking all of my experiences and the experiences of women that I knew and loved, and finding a way to get them into a story that would change people's minds about, I think the power that comes with this time of life, and encouraging them to do something with it. In terms of the true crime side of it, I have a very ambivalent relationship with true crime, but I have always been a consumer of it. I'll be completely honest about that. Yeah. Like ever since I was a little kid, it's just been something that those have been kind of my boogeyman stories. Some people like to read books about ghosts and werewolves and vampires. I read books about criminals. And so I knew a lot of this stuff. It was just in my head. Like I knew who these people were. I knew what these cases were. I'd spend a lot of time feeling very angry at men like, Jeffrey Epstein and Dominic Strauss-Kahn for basically getting away with treating women like dirt. And so it was me kind of getting a lot of that stuff out of or trying to get some of it out of my system so I wouldn't clog up and choke on it. But yeah, so that was my research. It's just getting very, very angry about it all.
When did you actually start writing, putting words to paper or on the computer? Like when did that begin?
It's hard to say because I mean this was like all COVID era and like I feel like all those years just kind of merged into one. I'm going to say 2000 and maybe the end of 2018.
Okay.
I started writing it. And but it wasn't, I was working on other things as well. So it was like I would pick it up and work on it and then set it down. And then there would be a pandemic. And then I would have to focus on living for a few months. And, so it was over the course of 3 years that it all came together, but it was pretty, it wasn't a straight go.
Did the pandemic hinder or help your writing? Like, in other words, some people say, oh, I had a lot of time and I got writing in. And other people said, I was a parent and it was so hard to even find the time.
Well, I'm divorced and I share custody with my ex-husband. So he has my daughter half of the time and I have her the other half of the time. So I would say the half of the time that I had her, very little work got done. And then the half of the other time that, she wasn't with me, I had literally nothing to do but write. So like literally nothing to do. So I guess a bit of both, right?
You had that quiet moment Ness was talking about.
I don't know, by the way, if any of you guys like spent the pandemic homeschooling and things like that on a full-time basis, you have my I'm in awe, because I did it half-time and that was hard. So like, if you did it full-time, you deserve a medal and a statue.
Absolutely. And a t-shirt and a
And a
mug and
t-shirt
everything
and a
else.
mug and a calendar. Yeah.
So, you mentioned you had a daughter. How did that perspective change you in writing this? Was it more motivation? Because like,
Yeah.
I have a 15-year-old daughter and all I can think about is her in all of those moments, right? So did that really push you through writing this?
Yes. Yeah, oh, absolutely. My daughter's 13, and I feel like she has just entered the Bermuda Triangle of being a female person.
Mhm.
And I think about this stuff all the time, and I think we've gotten to a point as a society where we think that this is normal, and it's not.
Mm.
We should not be spending this much time worried about our daughters. They should be able to go out and live their lives. We should be able to sit home and not worry about them. And I know there are a lot of people out there saying, we worry too much. Well, what? Like, no, I don't think so. Like, yeah, no, there aren't serial killers everywhere, but a lot of bad things happen to young girls. And I think that we've become way too accepting of that. And
Well, just like the middle school author said, kids should be able to be kids. Teenage
yeah,
girls should be able to be teenage girls and not have to worry about all this stuff. And here I am thinking I need to sign my daughter up for a class of self-defense already. I took it in college, but I'm thinking she needs it way before that.
yeah. Yeah, I've been trying to get my daughter to take Kung Fu and she just won't. But I'm like, please, just be able to defend yourself. Like it's very, very important. Yeah, it's something that I think about all the time, and it makes me angry because I feel like I should not have to worry about that. I feel like we, at this point in our evolution as human beings, we should not be able to, have to sit around worrying all the time about, a 13-year-old girl should be able to go out and do 13-year-old girl stuff without her mom sitting at home worried half to death about it.
Absolutely.
I just think that that's the way it should be, but it's not.
I just want to bring up, Melissa says, the more obvious connection to real people is what put this on another level for me and made me love this story. I agree. I mean, you really could feel your life and reality right in the middle. It wasn't a Marvel comic,
Yeah.
it felt like it could happen to any one of us. So I totally agree, Melissa. And then I do see Sonia says, I think the most powerful message was that as women, we must fight together against the power of bad men.
Yeah.
And I think that was what you were driving home as to why you wrote this book.
We can. I think that we we are the most powerful generation of women in the history of the world. We are. There's nothing to debate about that. We just are. And I think that we don't even understand how powerful we actually are.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're starting to kind of get a sense of it, but we don't know exactly what we can do. And if we were able to find a way to come together and really demand some serious change, like women did with Me Too,
mm-hmm.
we can make some stuff happen, big stuff happen. And I see it in the future, and I hope it comes to pass. Speaking of, and just to show you what is possible, Jeffrey Epstein would literally still be doing exactly what he was doing if it were not for one woman in her 50s named Julie K. Brown, who wrote for the Miami Herald and refused to let the story go. Nobody else was paying attention. He was having celebrities over to his dinner parties. Mm-hmm. Everybody had forgotten all about it. He was, playing buddy with the presidents of Harvard and MIT. And she refused to let it go. And she ended up writing a 5-part series in the Miami Herald that exposed everything that had been swept under the rug. And that is what ultimately brought him to justice. And then the other day, another example, there was there's a show on Netflix called The Most Hated Man on the Internet, which is about this real slime ball who had started the first revenge porn website. And he would basically hack into young women's phones, steal their pictures that they had taken of themselves in front of the mirror and whatever, and post them online with their Facebook information and their address and all of this other stuff. And he got away with it for years until this one woman, a mother of one of the young women, decided she wasn't going to do it before. And this woman single-handedly took this guy down. So it is possible. And you have a lot of women who are out there going out and doing this sort of stuff on their own. Think of what we could do as a group. You know, think of what we could do if we decided to all come together and fight for that. You know, the changes that we could make in the lives of, you know, all of these young women.
Did you have any idea when you were writing this how poignant it would be right now with, you know, with women trying to come together?
No, God, no, I did not. I did not foresee the current events at all. I mean, I like everybody. I mean, you're speaking specifically about the Roe versus Wade stuff. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I think we all knew that that was a possibility, but emotionally, I don't think any of us had wrapped our heads around it. You know, rationally, I thought, yeah, sure, possibly. Emotionally, it was still a massive punch in the gut. So no, I did not. And it actually happened on it. Yeah, it was announced the day that I was supposed to go on Good Morning America, and I got bounced because of that. And yeah, I would prefer that the book not be as timely as it is. But I think that we're going to see some really interesting stuff in the next month. I'm not going to make any predictions right now, but I will say that there have been a lot of interesting things that have happened. If you look specifically at the election in Kansas, you know, everybody thought that was going to go the other way. And you didn't have a lot of women out there going out and screaming or marching or like, you know, doing or protesting. They just quietly went in and voted. And they made it happen. So I'm really curious to see what's going to happen in this midterms. I think it might turn out to be quite different from what a lot of the pundits are talking about right now.
Yeah, we'll all be paying attention pretty closely.
I hope everybody's going to go out and vote.
Yeah, vote. And if you're not going to be on early vote, it's Casey just wrote, I absolutely love this book and the message of empowerment. I love seeing real women as the main characters who openly expressed age, related experiences without shame, and own their own power and strength. I've been recommending this read right and left.
Thank you.
That openness. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Like, that's what we need.
And the other thing, I'm going to make a plea to everybody. Please, no more self-deprecating humor. Don't talk about I mean, I've heard so many people you know, talking about making jokes about like how I feel so old or like my boobs are doing this or that other. We don't need to do that. Like, what's the point of that? Like, let's focus on what I think are the real strengths and powers that come with being this age. You know, the fact that, you know, I don't know how you guys feel, but like I'm not joking when I feel like this is the first time in my life where I actually feel like I know what I'm doing. And I know how to get it done. And I have the internal and some of the external resources that I need to make it happen. Like, was I supposed to not, this was the time of my life that I was supposed to dread? Are you kidding me? This is like so much better than it ever was before. And I think that's what I'd like to focus on. You know, we need to change this narrative. You know, everybody tells you, when I was in my 20s, I remember a woman, all of 38. She was ancient. She told me that one day I was going to wake up and I was going to be invisible. And I thought, no, I'm not. What are you talking about? Like, I don't care if anybody wants to look at me, but I'm sure as hell not going to be invisible. And I think that all of these stories that we've been told about what we're supposed to do when we reach this age, they're completely irrelevant. I don't know if they were true for our grandmother's generation, but they certainly aren't true of ours. So why are we still listening to them? And like when we talk about ourselves and we talk about our lives, like focus on the good sides, because there are so many things, like great things. You know what? Do younger women a huge favor and give them something to look forward to. I think that's the greatest gift that you can give another woman, is just like the ability to kind of look forward and say, you know what, I can't wait to be that age. It's not something I'm going to dread.
Well, I liked how you set it up in 3 parts. Like when you're younger, it's a learning phase. And then you do have that child rearing if you are going to be a mother. And then the end was this helping others phase, which is your purpose, right? It can be. And I love that, because I think that's something to look forward to, because now you've received. So how about we give at this point? And I liked that mentality.
Or lead a life of crime, if that's your thing. Like, so do you help do the Robin Hood thing, like, lead a life of crime for good purposes. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, this is 100 years ago. The average life expectancy for women in this country was right at about 50. They didn't get to experience what and that's one of the reasons that we don't have this consistent narrative about what you're supposed to do at this age. It's kind of new. So it's up to us to write it.
Well, I can tell you, most of my Meals on Wheels clients are women.
What kind of dog is that, by the way?
He's a Bernie Doodle, so part Bernese Mountain Dog, part Poodle. So yeah,
he's gorgeous.
He delivers Meals on Wheels with me. He's
oh, that's so sweet.
Does
he have? He should have like one of those little barrels, like the St. Bernards.
He helps me deliver books, so it's great. All right, everybody. So who here has questions? Start getting to them. And while you're thinking about your question,
I'll answer the one about the mug. So yes. So the G.
Yes.
That's my daughter's name is Georgia.
Okay.
So that's where the G comes from.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to ask you quick questions. Don't think about it. Just rapid fire. You ready to go? Okay. Beach or city?
City.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
All right. Cheer one or barbecue Fritos?
Oh my God. How do you pick? Oh, cheer one. I love cheer one.
Treadmill or running outdoors?
Oh, running outdoors.
Pantser or plotter?
Plotter.
White or red wine?
Red.
Are you the concrete or the rebar?
Rebar.
And the last one, nature, fire, or sight?
Fire.
All right. Thanks. Awesome. All
I'm
right.
in burn it down mode.
All right. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand and we can get to those. Otherwise, I'm going to go into the chat box because we have several that I think we missed along the way. All right. Let me get participants up. All right. Let's go to Emily Post, which I love that name.
Emily Post is here?
Emily Post is here, and she doesn't age very quickly. Here she goes. As someone in their late 20s, I feel like this book gave me an insight into years to come and really gave me a sense of empowerment. When you were writing the book, did you hope to reach out to women who may be younger than Harriet, Nessa, and Joe?
Yeah, so I've told this story before, but when I was in my early 20s, I got a copy of the J. Crew catalog, because the J. Crew catalog is going to play a big point in this. This plays a role in my personal story. And on the cover was Lauren Hutton. And at that age, she was my age. She was like in her late 40s when they put her on the cover of the J. Crew catalog. She became their spokesmodel. And nowadays that seems like, oh, okay, that's nothing unusual. It had never been done before at that point. You had never seen a woman of that age, like on the cover of a catalog of that sort, or really on any of the sort of fashion magazines. And I remember looking at that cover and thinking, oh my God, that's who I want to be when I grow up. Because I knew a bit about her. Like I knew that she was the one who fought to get like models actually paid properly. And she had fought for, for people in the profession to be treated as professionals rather than as, playthings. And, that she rode motorcycles and did all sorts of amazing stuff. And like, here she is, and she's not hiding her age at all. She didn't look like she'd had any like surgery or alterations. She had wrinkles, she looked amazing. And I thought, holy shit, that's what I want to be when I grow up. And I have kept that image with me my entire life. And I remember thinking, what a great gift to give to a younger woman. This idea that like, you do not have to dread, like, you don't have to grow up and become invisible. You can grow up and become Lauren Hutton.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, like I did that on purpose. Yes, that was something that I really wanted to do, was give younger women something to look forward to.
And that's what I see on Bookstagram is I want to grow up and be Harriet. Like
Yeah,
I've seen that. I know other people have seen it. It's there. I love it. All right. Shauna wants to ask, if the book was adapted to a TV series or movie, who would you love to see cast in each role?
Oh, so there are people who are working on this.
So, okay, tell.
But I can't, like, I mean, I don't want to get myself into any trouble. I'll tell you who I really love. Like, I think there are a number of actresses that I think would be great for each of them. Like for Harriet, you need somebody who's got that kind of crazy look in their eyes, right? You need somebody who you can look at and kind of wonder if they might or might not be completely sane. Like I think Charlize Theron could do that. I think Julianne Moore could do that. I even think like a really radical choice would be like, which only because I would love to see her come out of retirement, is Cameron Diaz, because she does have that big giant smile.
She could eat us. Yeah.
And I hate the fact that she's disappeared. I would like her to come back. And for Joe, you need somebody who's like, sporty and kind of tightly wound, like a, I don't know, like a Catherine Hahn or like a Naomi Watts or like somebody like that, somebody you can see with their hair pulled back and like just, running for miles and miles and miles and miles. But for Nessa, I actually wrote, like, I was thinking of one particular person as I was writing that character, and that was Yvette Nicole Brown, who played Shirley on Community. I don't know if you ever saw that show, but I just absolutely adored her. Like, I thought she was the greatest character. So I actually had her in my mind as I was writing that character.
Well, Shauna, who asked that, is nodding profusely. So I think
are you like Yvette Nicole Brown too? But I do. She's like my favorite. I really would love to see her in more stuff.
All right. Nisha says, just wanted to say that I love the book and recently shared my copy at a book club exchange where every single lady there wanted your book. So I hope they go out and get their own copy soon. So
yeah, so that's great. Yeah, that's, that is exactly what I was hoping would happen. There's in advertising, there's one thing that you always hope will happen and it never does, right? So you go out and you spend a lot of money on all of this big stuff and television and all the various kinds of media. But the one thing that's incredibly powerful, more powerful than anything else, is word of mouth. And you cannot buy it. And it drives people insane. But like that's so, to me, that's the ultimate goal, is like, wow, if people are actually talking about it, that means so much more than anything else. And that's the kind of publicity, for lack of a better word, that you just can't pay for. So thank you.
Yeah, that's the buzz you want. There's a comment that this is such a great example for Iran right now, for those girls over there. But some reviewers on Bookstagram have pointed out that this book can be seen as portraying all men in a negative light, or at most weak supporters. What do you say to them?
I think that's bullshit. I'll be completely. So I think Franklin is an amazing character. I think Art is a great guy. Like, nobody's perfect, and even the women are not portrayed as perfect. But I am a huge, it's hilarious to hear, like, I've seen people like, oh, I hate men and blah, blah, blah. Like, I had the world's greatest father, like the best father. And my father was like a giant man. Like, he was the kind of guy, like, I dated football players in high school, and they'd come to the door and my dad would answer and they would like quake in their boots. Like, that's how big he was. But the thing that I think made my dad the most amazing man, was he wanted an equal for a wife.
Mhm.
You know, he wanted a woman who was just as strong as he was. And to me, that is the height. That's the best. You know, I love a masculine dude, you know, and I think that the greatest sign of that is somebody who has the self-confidence and the respect to like want an equal as a
Mhm.
partner. And my brother is the same way. You know, he's another big, strong, burly dude who has a woman who's just as powerful and as strong as he is. So I actually, you know, am a huge fan of men like that. And I think
Harriet believed she had that partnership, but fooled herself into it.
exactly. I think Harriet, I think that a lot of us fall into that trap, right? You know, you that's what you really want and you think you've got it, and it kind of, and maybe she did for a while, you know.
I'm not so
Maybe she
sure.
did have it for a while, but like it just didn't, it went away. But yeah.
I think the first time he never gave her credit, or a partner gives credit to someone that helps, right? And
Yeah.
he never did. So that's why I think it was never quite equal. Um, we'll have just time for a couple more. With changing the narrative, I love the story that Faith's mother told about the snake and Eve. Where did that story come from? Was it something you had been told, or did you just write in it with Faith's character?
So there have been a lot of sort of feminist reinterpretations of that story, but I did not draw from, I did not read or draw from any of those. What I really wanted to do was just sort of was yeah, just kind of take this narrative and sort of turn it on its head, so that instead of being the person who was responsible for everything going wrong, you know, Eve, the very first female, you know, sort of takes on a completely different role.
Mhm.
And what would happen if the story had been written that way, you know,
Oh,
instead of the way that it was? How can you imagine how different things would be for women if that one story had just been slightly different? If,
right.
you know, we weren't the ones responsible for everything going to hell, you know, it would have, you know, it would have changed the world. And I think about that all the time. That's the power of stories, right? That's the power of taking a narrative and just changing it just a little bit and making everything different.
Well, I think that's why it's so important for female authors to have their time to shine and to get published and to have a voice, because if it's only men ever writing that narrative, how can we ever be trusted to be properly represented in a story,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
you know, exactly. And that's the reason that we need to be in everything. I don't think that, you know, I do not think that most men are out to get us. I do not think that at all. There are a few
right.
people who are out to get us. I'm not naive, but you know, I think that it's really just a matter of getting women into places of power or places where we can tell our stories, so that we can make the world a place in which we feel more comfortable, a
Yeah.
world that works for us just as well as it works for the men who've been living in it for, you know, how many millennia.
Yeah, and RBG said it best, right? Just let us have a spot at the table. Let us have a
Yeah.
place in that room. And I'll always remember that. Now, before we go, I just want to ask a couple of questions. What do you have coming up? What are you working on? What do we have to look forward to?
So my next book is I mean, it's not a sequel to The Change, but it's in the same universe.
Okay.
So I decided I wanted to create a universe of witchy women who, you know, take on bad guys. So it is very much in that world. It's actually set in Mattauk.
Okay.
And you, like, Harriet will kind of briefly make an appearance, but it's about a very different group of women. It's
Okay.
about a family who've lived on this one plot of land for, you know, 150 years and have sort of passed down different gifts from generation to generation. And so they end up, it ends up, they will end up crossing paths with some of the women from the first book, but it's not a sequel. It's a completely different story, but it's a lot of fun.
Well, when can we, is there sort of a deadline or a date-ish, season, a year, something?
I don't know quite yet, but I'm going to say, I would say maybe towards the beginning of 2024, it'll be out.
Okay. Awesome.
If my editor likes it. Otherwise I might spend a few months crying and, take some time off.
Well, we'll look forward to it. And then what books would you recommend that we read? Is it something maybe you've read recently, or maybe a favorite you've always had? Just give us some books that you put on our TBR.
So I really love the books of, there's one writer, I think, who had an enormous influence on me as a young woman, and who I went back and picked up one of her books just recently and was blown away by it again. Her name's Angela Carter. I don't even know if people read her that much in the States anymore. She's a British author. She died very young. She died in like 1992. And she wrote, so there's Wise Children, which is fantastic. There's Nights at the Circus, which is also great. But if you want just a little something to sink your teeth into first, she did a book of what I would call feminist fairy tales. Not a good way to explain it at all, but it's called The Bloody Chamber.
Okay, intriguing.
And, yeah, it's really good. It's really, really good. And yeah, that's what I would, it's a great place to start.
Well, Shelley, thank you for those questions, for asking those. And I know that you had some acknowledgements in the book that you wanted to talk about a little bit. So I'll give you that before you close down.
Yeah, so the book is dedicated to my friend Erica, who died, I think like a year and a half ago in a car accident. But one of the things that I think, she's just a perfect example of a real world woman who would fight to the death for what she believed in. And she was, one of the things that makes me sad about, having lost her so young was just this, I think she would have been able to do amazing things. When she died, her big passion in life was we grew up in a town that had a Confederate statue right in front of the courthouse, and she was hell bent on having that thing taken down. That was her, and she would get death threats. She would get people giving her trouble in the grocery store, but this was she just refused. She was that was her passion, and she was not going to give it up. And other people have since taken up the cause, but she's a great example of a person just like you, just like me, just like all of us, who had no supernatural powers at all, but just was mad enough and passionate enough that she could have gotten anything done. So I think that's what I strive to be.
We're happy for her inspiration through you, and giving us these powerful women, and such a great relationship of friendship and camaraderie. You just don't read enough about women working together. And so I really appreciated seeing that, and it was so impactful. But thank you, Kirsten, so much. And thank you for all you readers out there joining us. Please follow her website, her Instagram. She does a fantastic job, and you do such a wonderful job interacting with your fans, with your readers. I love to see it.
What do you do this for if not to interact with people?
All right, if you've got it on gallery, if she has liked or commented on one of your posts, go ahead and raise your hand. Lots. I love it.
There you go.
But it's awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you for following LB, the Lover of Books. Check out my YouTube channel. The recording should be up in case you missed some of it, or you can share it with your book club. On Sunday, November 13th at 2 p.m., I'm going to be hosting author Bonnie Garmus right there for her novel, Lessons in Chemistry. She was also another GMA pick, and See why the parade says it's a must-read debut. Meet Elizabeth Zott, a formidable, unapologetic, and inspiring scientist in the 1960s California, whose career takes a detour when she becomes the unlikely star of a beloved TV cooking show. In this novel that the New York Times says is irresistible, satisfying, and full of fuel, it reminds you that you can change, that change takes time and always requires heat. So you're going to see some similar themes throughout these novels, and I'd love to compare them. Thank you, Mike, for running behind the scenes. If you know of an author that you'd like to hear me chat with, please let me know. And again, check out YouTube and subscribe and like just to help that reach. Kirsten, you've been an absolute delight tonight.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course, and thanks everybody. Y'all have a great night.
Bye.